Hi, everyone. I just wanted to welcome you all to our webinar this evening. This is our June webinar, and we are covering a number of months. Normally, we have these every month, but we are going to be having this one be kind of our summer webinar. I am Jennifer Morrison, and I am the incoming president for Literacy in the Discipline 612. We are an organization that focuses on literacy in the secondary levels. We are focused and kind of seated in South Carolina, but our reach is in fact nationwide, as I am. I am actually not in South Carolina as well. I wanted to also make sure, sorry, I had somebody else that was coming in. I also wanted to make sure that I let you know that our webinars are funded by the South Carolina Middle Grades Initiative. They provide us a grant that allows us to be able to offer these to you for free. We are recording, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our facilitator for the evening, and that is Wanda Littlejohn.
Thank you so much. I am Wanda Littlejohn. I am going to facilitate the conversation tonight, and we are here to hear from some exciting panelists on multilingual voices, disciplinary spaces, for literacy practices for equity and inclusion. I'm going to give everybody that's on the panel a moment to tell us a little bit about themselves so that everyone in the room knows who you are and the expertise you bring. We'll start with Shari.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Shari Revels-Davis, and I am the secondary multilingual teacher for the Chester County School District. I get that mixed up all the time. And I have a partner. Her name is Marilla Hanks. She's in charge of the primary. And while I've worked with multilingual students almost my entire teaching year, which I've been teaching for over 28 years, this has been my first year as an official MLL teacher. So I'm coming at it from two different ways. Oh, and I'm sorry, I am certified literacy and English.
Thank you so much, Shari. We'll now move to Miss Diana Vargas, if you'll tell us a little bit about yourself and your expertise.
Well, hi, I'm Diana Hager. I have been a teacher for about 15 years now. My last 4 years doing English for multilingual English learners in Peak County schools. International teacher as well. I am from Colombia. And some of my bachelor's degree in teaching English as a second language. Recently National Board certified and serving as a EML teacher at different schools in my district.
Thank you so much. And now we'll move to Miss Carrie Rieder, if you'll tell us a little bit about yourself and your area of expertise.
Hi, my name is Carrie Rieder. I have been working with or teaching ML students since 2009. Before that, I was a high school social studies teacher. I currently work at Carolina High School, where I teach a sheltered English 1 and sheltered English 2 class. I have a master's degree in TESOL, and I am certified secondary ELA, social studies, and literacy teacher. And I'm also a parent of 2 children who are bilingual. My husband is from Germany, and that is where my interest in all things language learning really took off from that point when I had my children years ago.
Thank you so much for sharing a little bit about yourself. As you can see tonight, we have a very diverse panel, and all of them have different expertise. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our first question, and any of the panelists can respond to this. So the first question is, can you share an example of a lesson or unit where you intentionally plan for language development and disciplinary learning?
I guess I'll go ahead and start off. One thing that I know my students all love, and this is from the multilingual learners as well as general ed learners, They love the spoken word unit. And a spoken word unit, it's basically, I have all of my students, they create their own spoken word poem in their own language or whatever they feel the most comfortable in, because, and the reason why I do that is because literacy is all about connections, and it's through the connections that people learn. So for having them write their spoken words in their own language has been great in creating like a family type atmosphere. Then after they have written it in their own language, I then ask them to translate into English. And it becomes interesting because then they can correlate how their language and English, they kind of mesh, but then they don't. Because when you're speaking your spoken word poem in your native language, it's not going to say the same in English. You're not going to get the same type of impact. And so at that point, they're learning the different types of dialects, what type of wording they would like to use for the impact that they want. And it just really gets my students wondering, okay, so if I say it like this in Spanish, it's not really going to mean the same over here in English. And this is what I want them to say. And so that go ahead and gets them looking up synonyms, antonyms, multisyllabic words, things that would fit in the tone that they want. That's one of the things I do.
I can share mine next. It's hard to remember units from the year past. I don't know about anybody else, but I feel like my memory gets a little bit wiped at the end of the year. But recently I have been working on providing ML supports for units in English 2 to add to our district's landing page where teachers can go for supports. So just an example of how I'm planning for language development in that discipline is well, the theme of the unit is conflict. And at the end of the unit, they do write an argumentative essay. So what I provide to teachers in this unit is translanguaging tools, how they can do side-by-side translations of the text in the unit. Also instructions about how to use Magic School AI to provide leveled text summaries, and when it's appropriate for, I teach mostly lower levels, and these supports are mostly for level 1s and levels 2. Lots of SLIFE students with limited and interrupted formal education. So you might have side-by-side summaries or side-by-side lower levels of the text. That's really a big support that I provide in my sheltered classes that I think makes a big difference. Another thing that I think is really key is using, you have your learning targets or your essential question or whatever it is your district is focusing on and calling that, but you need a language target, a learning target that focuses specifically on the type of language that the student's going to be using for that standard or that lesson for that day in that unit. So providing some level 1 and level 2 ML language targets that correspond to the learning targets and the standards in the unit is really important. It's a great way to find your map and find your guide for where to go for supporting disciplinary literacy for your MLs. I also provide rubrics that allow teachers to grade their MLs based on their current proficiency levels. These are all things you see in the iLab, using a rubric for that student's level of language ability. And that's hard to wrap your mind around if you don't do this day in and day out like I do in my sheltered class. So giving that support to teachers where they have a rubric saying an argumentative essay, what's it going to look like for a level 1? How do I grade what they are doing? Really is helpful. Lots of vocabulary supports. I think when I know disciplinary literacy is not a focus on vocabulary, but if you're teaching lower level MLs or SLIFE students, you really are focusing on basic literacy skills while at the same time building their discipline knowledge. So you have to scaffold that for them. You do have to teach them those words in advance using effective practices you have to use sentence frames and stems to scaffold that for them, to frame it for them.
Okay, I can also share, adding to what you just shared as well. I was trying to really make my brain to think about a specific unit, and it comes science, so including some disciplinary goal for science, comparing, contrasting insects in this case. So that was the language goal as well, describing life cycles and comparing what is similar, what is different, what makes them beneficial to the environment, what makes them invasive species. And so, as you said, also trying to think about newcomers and all the language they need, because it's not just the academic words, but essential words that they may not know yet. So including that as a pre-teaching vocabulary, trying to predict which words they don't know in the academic science part, plus language in general. The strategies that I usually use and are really effective is definitely visuals, gestures, body language as well. I become kind of little clown sometimes if needed, if I need to kind of demonstrate what I'm trying to mean with something, or what a word means in that context. Sentence frames, as you mentioned as well, to help them with oral or written responses. The home language, in my case, I can communicate in Spanish as well, so I can identify easier cognates. But with my other students, letting them use their home language can help me also identify why they know, what they understand, if they're confused, and it gives them some way of feeling successful as well. And just trying to integrate all that knowledge into the unit and lesson, and being able to talk about their experiences as well. So what insects they have seen also in their home countries, which ones are not that common, or which one is new, and how we can identify it. So those are kind of some of the things that I have done, and I have shared lessons with core teachers, so they can also spot maybe some of the scaffolding I'm doing in my classroom, and hopefully makes more sense to them. So sometimes I say sentence starters and I know what they mean, but maybe for a newcomer can look totally different to a transitional student, a long-term ML. So that's what I'm trying to do, just to help also core teachers to how to help newcomers and other MLs in their classrooms.
Thank you all three for the wonderful comprehensive list. I want to kind of zoom in a little bit. The audience understands the concept of sentence frames and how those sentence frames are used as a strategy and can be used as a strategy across all disciplines, especially like if we're trying to get a kid to think like a historian, or to think like a mathematician, or to think like a scientist. Can you all speak to, and it doesn't matter who takes this question, but speak to like, what is a sentence frame, and how would you get a core content teacher acclimated to that strategy?
A sentence frame is I think there's two words you hear a lot with MLs and with accommodation. One is sentence frame and one is sentence stem, and they are different. A sentence frame is more appropriate for level 1s and level 2s. That's a complete sentence that has important key vocabulary words or phrases, 2 or 3 word phrases missing from the sentence. And you wouldn't give this frame to students alone, standing on its own. You would give it with a small chunk of text, like a paragraph or a word bank, and those words would have been taught previously to using the sentence frame. The sentence frame is where you come in with your language as a scientist or as a historian. You're going to frame the response using the language structures that you commonly use in your discipline. And then you will have the keywords you want the students to be learning there, or the key phrases there, or the information they plug in next to it. Translanguaging is a great tool to use here, and I hesitate to I want to be very clear that I mean translanguaging and not translation. So translanguaging would mean maybe you have the frame or certain words in the frame, you know, the student does not understand, translated into their language for them. They are not copy pasting that into Google Translate. That it's there for them. Or you have their words, you have them connect them to visuals and say, well, what is this word in your language? And they would provide that. That's translanguaging. It's not copy pasting Google Translate. It's being able to see how the languages relate to each other, finding cognates, and then being able to express what you know about the subject using the sentence frame, and that's using the language structure of the discipline.
I can also add to the conversation about sentence frames or sentence starters. So depending on the content area, they may look a little bit different. So let's say, okay, I was giving the example about science. So when my kids were comparing the monarch butterflies to the spotted lionflies, if there was an open-ended question like, what is similar about these two insects? I can say, one similarity is that both of them blank. That way you are kind of reinforcing those patterns, and they can continue building academic language orally and in written, and also gives them a sense of they know how to continue writing, not trying to come up with the whole answer and being kind of puzzled because they don't know how to get started. And that just continues adding to their language and give them opportunities to try to find the answers in their resources instead of trying to struggle finding where I can see it or what do I need to say. And I think they feel more confident as they don't have to come up with the whole sentence by themselves. So that's kind of in the case of science, or I don't know, social studies. One cause of war was blank because blank, so that at least help them to look for resources and find the answers and plug them in to their written assignment, oral assignment, or assessment.
Right. So my next question for the three of you, and we'll start with Shari. I'm coming to you for the answer or for your answer. What are the ways that you have supplemented the materials provided to you to support your newcomers or your ML students?
Okay, well, I'm coming from the literacy English background. I'm just ESOL as a supplemental certification. So I already have multiple different level readers for my students. Now, no, I have 6 all the way through 12, and I jump from school to school. So I have very limited things that I can carry with me. But the one thing that is always standard is I always have little journal books. And every one of my students, they get a little journal book. And this is where I use the sentence starters. And this is how they start writing their own story. And again, I allow them to write in whatever language is comfortable for them. And then we'll go back and see how the language that they're writing in compares to what needs to be said in English. But I also notice that for my secondary level students, they don't have the appropriate age level stories for them that are, written for newcomers. So the stories that they write actually become our model text. That's how I supplement our curriculum. And the supplemental text, the stories that they write, I've actually started making them into little booklets ourselves that we're just going to be able to use throughout the years. Okay, let's go ahead and pull out Billy's book on first day of high school in a different land. Okay, so we pull out his book, and I always have them put 5 words per page. And we just go through that book. And that's how they're learning comprehension, their fluency, and phonics all at one time. Plus, it is giving them, it's not babying them, I guess I could say. They're actually getting age level text instead of, because the only thing I actually have and have found are elementary school texts. And it's almost, and I hate to say it, but it's almost insulting to my juniors who are coming in to high school and they're reading about 4th grade Ellie, how she's riding her bike down the street. My students are driving cars, they're not riding a bike. So it kind of fits their way of thinking. So that's what I've always done. And it seems to work.
I love that. I love that you got your students writing books and they get to read each other's books. Any one of our panelists want to chime in on some supplemental things that you use to offset some of the things that your students need in the classroom?
I would just want to say, Sherry, I love the books idea. I think I might steal that. That is a really great idea and so creative. But another supplementary material I use a lot, even though I teach sheltered English classes, and I have a background in social studies, but a lot of the stories that we read have a connection to history and to social studies, and students might be lacking that knowledge, whether it's because the curriculum in their country didn't focus on American history at all, which is often the case, or they had a limited type of education to history. So for example, a story we read last year is called By Any Other Name, and it's an excerpt from a story by an Indian woman who grew up going to British-run schools in India when India was under colonial rule. And I found videos on YouTube short videos to explain British colonialism, articles and pictures to explain the background and the history and why it would produce this conflict between the two cultures, which was a main focus of the story. And I think just realizing these things as you are teaching, that you know what, not everyone knows who George Washington is, and then here it's just mentioned by name, assuming everybody knows what that is, or this event in history. And so just providing background knowledge using things like videos, summaries, websites, pictures, labeled pictures, any of that can be so helpful to giving students that aha, like, okay, I know what this is, and I'm not the only person in this room who's wondering what's going on. That's really important.
I also want to add, like, yes, probably I'm going to steal also the idea of writing books. I love that. So they can continue building knowledge and also to incorporate their personal experiences as well in the classroom. Adding out to how I supplement materials, what I try to do, especially for my newcomers, is trying to reduce the reading demands and just try to focus on the key elements to start with something and go in depth with that. And finding, as you said, also videos for my students who are having a hard time decoding. I do middle school, and I feel when they come to us and they don't have literacy skills really developed, so they may be fluent when they're speaking to their peers or the teachers, but when they come to reading and decoding and writing, they struggle. So when my focus is not to measure reading comprehension, I try to create audios using AI tools as well. That way they can read and listen at the same time. And it provides a little bit more of support on what they are lacking at the time while they build those decoding skills. Reliable visuals, images as well, level diagrams, pictures, uh, as much support as I can based on whatever text or unit we're trying to work on.
You're on mute.
Diana, you can stay right there. I'm coming to you for the
Okay,
next question.
Can I add something in real quick?
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
I don't know if anyone has ever used board games like Scrabble, and we also do bingo, hangman, Wheel of Fortune, things like that. That is something that gets everybody excited. So, and I'm sure everybody uses this, but I just wanted to throw that out there to make sure that folks realize it doesn't have to be something serious all the time. You can have fun. You can do it electronically or be like me and get the actual board game itself. I just wanted to add that in.
Thank you. I love that. So this is gonna kind of shift the focus a little bit. We're wanting to know what are some ways that your school or district can support newcomers and multilingual learners within disciplinary instruction, viewing their cultural background as an asset within that discipline. So I'm coming to you, Ms. Diana, first on your opinions and thoughts on that question.
I think a way to continue supporting, especially our newcomers, is maybe providing more PD to our content area teachers on strategies that maybe for EML teachers or language teachers come more natural because that's our language, and I want to focus on this one. As we try to say on my team that we all speak different languages, and we're not talking about Spanish, Italian, English. Our content area has specific words that for us it makes sense, but for our kids, not necessarily is the case. So as we are here discussing sentence starters, for me comes natural to say it, and maybe for some people may not be as clear. And it's just because of the content is not, I mean, that's not their specialty. And I try to compare it to doctors too. Like if a doctor is trying to explain to me what is wrong with me as a doctor, I have no idea what's going on. They need to really scaffold that learning and bring it down to our level so we can access the information if I need to run to the pharmacy again, the medicine, or if I just need to call everyone and say, it was good to meet you. And I try to put on these terms because sometimes we forget that we speak a specific language in our content area. So I think going back to my point, PD for our content areas, because sometimes we're assuming we're speaking the same language, and sometimes it's just not clear. And teachers want to help newcomers. Sometimes they just are not necessarily totally aware of how they can, or what they are already doing that actually is helping them. Sometimes we don't give ourselves credit of all the hard work that we're doing. Nowadays with AI tools, I think it's amazing because we can scaffold learning, creating visuals, diagrams that are really key, essential for all learners. I'm really visual, so if I have picture, I will remember better than if I have just a plain text in front of me. And including lessons that are culturally relevant. Just can think about, let's say, we're reading books in ELA. If we have a access to the book in their language, they still have access to the same content, and they're using their language as a gift to be part of the discussion instead of being isolated. So I think that could be some of the points how schools can continue supporting or better support newcomers. Maybe also focusing on depth instead of coverage. So if we think about in the long term, what is going to be essential for these kids to be successful in and outside the classroom, I think it will make more sense to everyone what we need to focus on instead of just trying to cover everything, especially when it comes to newcomers.
I love that you made the connection that, you know, all of us are content area teachers and we all have a language that is specific to our content. And if you just thinking about it through that lens, it makes a lot of sense that I can't teach a kid how to analyze a periodic table. Like I can't just come out with that. I got to start with something else. In the language of science, you got to start with something else. The language of math, you've got to teach a lot of symbols and what things mean, what's a multiplication sign. And there's sometimes double meanings for signs. And so everybody having that concept that a content or a discipline is its own separate language, and this is no different. So if any of our other panelists want to expand on what Ms. Diana stated about things that your district or school could do to support our newcomers or our multilingual learners, we'll go ahead and add to that conversation.
I just want to hop in and say, we have a small district, and up until this past year, there was only one MLL teacher, and she serviced the entire district. Our population literally doubled in the space of 2 months. And so now they've brought me in as a literacy teacher to help out. I actually have a question to anyone who might be able to help me out. What are some things that I could take to my district? Because my district, we're all clueless at this point. We're kind of feeling our way around, trying to see if something is right, seeing if something is wrong, and we're having a difficult time of it. So when I saw this question as one of the ones that we were going to discuss, I figured this was a great time for me to ask, what are some suggestions that I can actually take to my district, take to my schools, to assist us all in feeling our way through this new era of ours?
I hope that I can help you out a little bit. That I can't imagine. I've always taught in Greenville County, which, you know, is a huge district with a large ML population. So at our school in particular, we have used the co-teaching model successfully for the past, I don't know how many years, 5, 6 years, maybe. And I think that a co-teaching is a great way to go for MLs, especially classes with high levels of level 1 and level 2 MLs. You could have a ESOL teacher in there with the content area teacher. It might also be possible to have a teacher, one of the teachers with an ESOL certificate. Maybe they work typically as a social studies teacher, but they've taken those, they've taken some courses, they've added on the ESOL certificate. That's going to help if districts can facilitate that. In our district, we still use Elevation, and you can get your certificate using Elevation. There's probably districts could work with different colleges to get those classes so teachers are prepared to take the praxis, not so that they will become a full-time ML teacher, but because then they have the skills to support the MLs in their classroom through the SIOP model, the sheltered instruction protocol, or, you know, just any strategies they would learn through that would be helpful. I would also say one thing I really wanted to talk about was schools and districts need to celebrate being multilingual. My own children, they're bilingual German and English speakers, and the reaction I get from people is always, "Oh, wow, you know, that's amazing. That is so great." And they have all kinds of questions for me. And I don't think that many of my multilingual students who come from Central American countries have that same experience. When a teacher or another person in their life realizes, oh, they speak a language that isn't English, that reaction is not instantly positive. It's not instantly looking at this as a, a great thing that not everybody has. And I think schools really need to focus on that, highlight members of your staff who speak different languages or who grew up speaking a different language. Make uh, make announcements in two languages, make it a positive, not something, it is a barrier, but rather than focusing on it being a barrier, focus on it being an enrichment. This person's brain works differently because they are learning two languages, and that is plus. And I think that shift in mindset will definitely help newcomers excel.
Thank you. We have Jasmine here. Hi, Jasmine. She
Hey,
has joined
I'm
this
so
wonderful.
sorry. Thank you. This it sounds ridiculous, but I am pet sitting for my friend's gerbils, and they got in a fight, and I had to take them to the vet because one of them had to have surgery on his tail. And I was like running around, and I just looked up and I said, "Oh my gosh, it's 6:30. What am I doing?" Because I've been at the small animal vet with a gerbil having his little tail amputated.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, why don't you introduce yourself
That
and
is the perfect introduction to me today.
tell us about your experience as an ML teacher.
Fantastic.
And then we'll go into the questions.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I'm Jasmine Lauer. I teach ML students in 6th through 8th grade at Pine Hollow Middle School in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is my second full year in that position, but prior to that, I began teaching ESL students. Actually, really, when I was student teaching, I had a few students who did not speak English as their home language and was just captivated by what they were like as students and thought, oh, this is like really a cool vibe for me. So for 18 and a half years, I taught at Sanderson High School, and I taught all the we then called them, of course, ESL students, all the ML students in 10th grade, English 2 in a sheltered environment. I had the first sheltered class in Wake County at Sanderson High School after a week-long teacher academy workshop where they were like, you know what would be cool if we could just like have those kids all together and see what happened. I was like, oh, that sounds great. So I have been teaching ML students for many years, and I'm just now in the actual ESL classroom in Wake County and loving it.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about some ways that you are supporting students that are newcomers in that classroom? What advice would you give other disciplinary or secondary teachers on what they can do to make sure that their newcomers and ML students are successful in their content class?
Okay, awesome. That's a lot. One of the things that I think has really become a focus in my classroom in the last 2 years is advocacy. And so we talk a lot about these students are 6th through 8th graders, and as 6th through 8th grade humans can be, sometimes they want to say like, oh, well, I didn't understand. They like to be very not self they don't like to be self advocates a lot. And so I've really worked hard with them on teaching them how to self advocate in their classrooms. Sometimes that means that, especially for newcomers, that we sit down together and we practice like Miss Smith, and they say, Miss Smith, can I like we practice back and forth with like really how they can ask a teacher for help, how they can ask a teacher, just like raising their hand, and kids will say, but I don't know what to say when she gets over there when I raise my hand. And so really working on some advocacy. My newcomers, they get a little packet of cards that have different phrases on them, so that if they really, really, really don't feel like they can say anything to the teacher, then one of them says, I don't understand. Can you help me, please? I don't have a pencil, just little things like that. And one of the things I do with my colleagues, just to get the kids used to speaking English to folks outside of my classroom, because I feel like they're more excited to do it in my classroom than other places, or more willing, is that I tell them when they show them the card to do that sort of language mimic with them also. So if they show them the card that says, I do not understand, then make them say, I do not understand to them, and to help them practice with that, just to give them some, I feel like it gives them some agency in their own learning, instead of them feeling like I'm here and this is overwhelming and I don't know what to do with myself. Or with all of these people who are talking and I don't know what they're talking about. So I do try to spend a lot of time with advocacy. That's sort of been a theme of mine, like me, myself, advocating for my students in the building and teaching the students how to advocate for themselves. And with my colleagues, I try to talk a lot about, I think when I jumped on, it was Carrie who was talking about, this idea of language learning being an asset model, not a deficit model, that kids with their second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth language of English, as they are learning that they're bringing something that is so valuable, and that is knowledge of another culture, another language, all of the experiences that they've had, and really helping my colleagues to see, like, hey, when you talk about this, maybe you could ask the kids about this element. And so I think one thing that was really cool this year is that in the health class, which is sometimes overwhelming for kids in a number of reasons, because they have to sit still instead of playing PE, right, and all that stuff. But this year, the health teachers just said to my students, when they were doing like a nutrition unit, and they had to bring a label and analyze the label and say which things were good food, what was good for you, all that good stuff about a nutrition label. And they encourage students to bring a snack label from their own, like a native snack label from where they came from. And the kids were so excited to be like, oh, look, I brought my samba wrapper. I get to tell people about sambas in class. Whereas in the past, they've done that, and, they just like chose a cafeteria wrapper because they didn't want to be like, oh, my wrapper doesn't look like everybody else's. And so I think just doing little things like that to show like they have something to bring to the table that's very different than our native English speakers, and helping them to see that they have a wealth of knowledge and a wealth of experience, and helping their peers and their teachers to see that.
So that kind of leads us into that conversation about like giving examples of how you in your own classroom have brought that cultural background into a lesson, and how it may have changed how students actually learn that content. So if you want to add to Jasmine's comment about bringing in that cultural piece, we can do that now.
I have 5 different classrooms, one in each of the schools that I serve. And each classroom is decorated differently. It's based off of the population within that school. But all of my schools, they have the sign on the front that says I call it the Cultural Welcome Center. And so it's not just for my MLL students. The MLL students will come in, we'll have a quick, probably 30-minute lesson. And because that's all I'm usually allocated is 30 minutes per group, per school. So I'm in a really crazy situation. And then I actually have a question for Carrie. Is you being a sheltered classroom, and I'm gonna get back to with you being in a sheltered classroom. Okay, it'll come up in a second. But but it's called I called my rooms the cultural wellness, welcome center, because, I have my cultural MLL students, they come in, we have our quick lesson or anything. And within the last 15 minutes of me being in that school, we allow some of their friends, their American friends, or wherever they're from, to come in and have a little social time with us. So we're interacting with different cultures and different languages. And it's just really cool. We have a lot of English students who come in and like, well, I want to learn how to speak Spanish. And then I have some Arabic students. And some people want to learn how to speak Arabic. So it's just like 15 minutes of coming together. We're having a great time. We're all learning through laughter. And they seem to really, really enjoy that. And I just remember the question is it, how beneficial is it for them to be in a sheltered classroom? And how can I convince my district to do something similar to that? Because jumping between 5 different schools is kind of crazy for me, but that's what I do.
I'm happy to answer that question and then add to the question about celebrating culture in my own classroom. But so my sheltered classes are only for level 1 newcomer students. And I teach because I have a certification in secondary ELA, and I also am a certified ESOL teacher, I can do that. And it can count as one of my students' service models. So that would be the thing you would need, a teacher with those 2 certifications in order for that to work as a service model. And the students in my class are on track to go to take the English 2 EOC. So that is why I'm in specifically English 2, that EOC year, and English 1. The students in my English 1, a lot of them do end up taking English 2 sheltered with me again, just depending on their language growth or where they came in the year before that happened. Some of them have done so well on the access test and their language skills have grown so much with not only being in an ESOL class, but also having that sheltered instruction class where the content and the language is right here in their challenge zone of development. That they've grown out and they're able to go to a co-taught English 2 class instead of staying in the sheltered. But I have seen great benefits. This year, I actually had 3 of my sheltered English 2 students pass the EOC. So, and that isn't even their goal, but they were able to pass it, which, I was so proud of them because they all worked very hard, and also makes you feel really good, blows up your ego a little bit as a teacher. But so just to address the question about how do I center culture in my own classroom, and well, always giving students the opportunity to connect what they're learning to their own personal identities and beliefs and experiences. Through discussion and writing assignments is a really easy way to do that, or unit projects. I think of one instance, this was from an ESOL class, not a sheltered class, but in the book we were reading in the unit, it was looking at houses in, gosh, where was it? It was a Pacific island somewhere. The book had pictures of the houses and pictures of what the school looked like. And I had a student in the class who was from Kenya, and I had other students from Honduras and Guatemala, mostly Honduras, Guatemala. And I just thought of the idea, what does a house look like in your country? And they all wanted to show me what a house looks like. And they all wanted to know what this Kenyan student's house looked like. He had to pull it up on Google Maps. Then, what's the school look like there? And it's a great moment. Any opportunity you can give them to talk about themselves or to show about themselves or think about themselves as being unique and not as oh, well, yeah, but it doesn't look like houses here. Just in a way to show off, to feel happy about where they came from, to know that their experiences are valuable in school is a good thing.
I can add that also about that. And in my case, you guys mentioned about shelter instruction or co-teaching. In our district, we do the pullouts. And I also travel, as you do, to different schools. Um, Thinking about that is usually budget. We cannot stay in one school. So we're doing the best we can. And this year we are focusing on newcomers and kids who need the support the most. And leaving the students, which access test scores show that they are more proficient. They're missing some academic vocabulary and all that, but they will be more successful in the classroom even if they don't see an EML teacher. So we really focus on helping the ones in need. As my coordinator would say, the ones who are bleeding, we need to help them. They need a band-aid. So, um, so in our case, it's pull out. And I think all the options we have, they have pros and cons. And so anyways, pull outs. Talking about how we embrace their identities. What I have tried, I have mostly Spanish speakers, and I'm a Spanish speaker myself. But I have also Arabic students. I have Hindi students. The way I have tried to embrace that is like trying to say hello in the language, and you just can see the change in their eyes, even if I say wrong. Because I have been like, you see, it's difficult. It's difficult. I cannot speak one word in Arabic. And you're already saying a million words in English, even if it's not at the same level of your peers. But I mean, you're speaking already in sentences. I can hardly remember how to say hello in Arabic. So, or I mess it up all the time. And just embracing the struggle, embracing learning a language takes time. And I try to remind them it takes time. And compared to when we were little, when we were babies, we were not speaking. We were just listening and trying to absorb everything. So give themselves also some time because we have so many students which were A and B students in their country. So it's no lack of, they are intelligent, they're smart. They have the knowledge, they just cannot express it because the language is on the way. So trying to give them, those yay moments too and what we can improve. So just using one or two words, sometimes I get it right, and sometimes they get just a good laugh about it. So we laugh it out, and they're like, "You see, I'm learning too." Also trying to incorporate their experiences, as you said. Like I remember doing a lesson about school lunches around the world. I have a reading and they featured like 4 different places. So it didn't really match my kids, like know their countries. So then we talk about that, like how different it is, the food they offer, and how it goes. Like you make the line to the cafeteria. Do they bring the food to your classroom? In my case, I'm from Colombia. Like I went to the school, I needed to bring money and pay for my food, and I choose what I wanted to eat. So we have to make a line and wait and try to get the food. So just learning about that helps. And also when we have a newcomer, I try to remind teachers to put them with a peer so they know the processes. Sometimes, like you don't get the food, you just wait, you need to take this, you need to take that, like just help them because they may have a totally different experience in their home country. So that's kind of how I try to incorporate what they bring and their knowledge about the world because it's a different view of the world.
So we've heard a lot of things here in this space tonight. We've heard that if you are a content area teacher, you might need to start incorporating sentence frames so that students have a starter to access the content in your discipline. We've also heard about journals and keeping up with the journal so that they can, have that as a written way to express their thoughts. We've heard the phrase cards. I've never heard that, but I feel like we need to give all of our teachers phrase cards for their newcomers. And so we have a couple of minutes left to open up to the audience to see if they have any questions or last words. We have a feedback link in the chat for you to provide us some feedback on how this session was, but I'll turn it over to the audience if you have a question for any of our panelists.
I have a question, and it can go out to all of you. So I am an instructional coach, and so I'm going to a school that's a dual language, and they go up from K to 4, which is great, but it expands from K-8. So what are some ways, or do you have any suggestions, rather, of some text that we could possibly use in their ELA classes? You talked a lot about, celebrating identities, and I love the lunches around the world. So are there more text or more resources that we can push out to our Gen Ed classes so that they are able to incorporate exactly what you all are doing on a daily basis?
I can share some names of books that I happen to know just by coincidence, I guess. Like, let's say for ELA, they're reading any book, trying to find books that can represent some of the kids in the classroom as well. So Esperanza Rising, for example, is a reading book, actually really good, about a American-Mexican student with experience in the USA. So if they see themselves somehow represented in the language as well, in the reading, it will open the conversation to all the students about seeing the world differently from a different point of view. Plus also some of our kids can be also feel represented. And I know that one is in English and in Spanish. And there is another book that I just happened to read that is called Other Words for Languages. And this one is the experience of a student from, if I'm not wrong, Syria, and the struggles she went when they moved to the USA, just because of trying to find identity again, feeling part of a new culture. So I guess incorporating books that open the conversation about identity and featuring different cultures as well.
Thank you so much. It's 7 o'clock. That's our hour. This time went by really, really fast. I do have an ask. If you'll go to the chat, grab that link to give us some feedback. You'll get your continuing education credit certificate that you can take to your district to get whatever points you would like to get for PD. I'm going to thank our 4 panelists for such an amazing discussion. You all are very knowledgeable, and I loved the things that you all shared here. I also appreciate you letting me facilitate this conversation, and I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Morrison.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for attending. Just a couple of housekeeping things. Unfortunately, they kind of ran together when I put them into the chat. The first thing that you're going to see is a link for our website. We are always looking for people to write blogs. And so if you have interest in writing a blog for us, whether it's for this particular call or for a future one, it's on our website. You certainly can go out there. You also can find our entire archive, years worth of webinars and blog posts and things. We've done multi-language learners before, so you can actually search and find all of the materials that we have on our website. The feedback form, as as Wanda pointed out, is available there for you as well. That gives us some feedback, and it also gives you an opportunity to share anything that you might still would like to know more about and for us to have future webinars about. And then also, as was indicated, the form for the CEU certificate is there. If you fill out that form, it will generate a certificate for you. Now, we can't provide the credits for you, but those, you can take that certificate to your district office in order to be able to count that for your CEUs. Okay. All right. And with that, I just want to say thank you to all of our attendees, and thank you so much for our panelists, and thank you to the amazing Wanda Littlejohn for facilitating this. She did an amazing job. So proud of her. And by the way, she didn't say this and she didn't introduce herself, but she is going to be our new vice president, and we are so thrilled to have her on board. So anyway, if there's anything else, does anyone else have any last minute questions that they would like to ask the panelists? If anybody's willing to stay on for a couple more minutes? All right.
Could I answer on the last question really quickly? If
Absolutely.
people stay on. One of the things that I like to do is to use children's books to activate like cultural learning and cultural understanding. And one of my favorite books, if you haven't read this book, is My Mother's Tongues. It's a book about all of the different languages and how mother and grandmother switch between languages depending on where they are, sort of code switching. And the end is really beautiful because it talks about how all of those languages are inside them and that you're not losing your old language, you're just learning a new one. And so I like to start my class like that at the beginning of the school year. And then I use children's books all the time. I've bought books we learn about desegregation and all kinds of stuff like that are really difficult, like academic concepts already. And I like to use children's books to activate that learning because they're pictures and smaller words and less words on the page. And sometimes they can get all that information.
Just real quick, I promise I'm not going to hold everybody up. I'm also part of the LIDS board, and my task is to make sure that we have a resource page for all of our teachers when it comes to books and things like this, for resources for your classroom. So within probably by the end of July, look for that page because we'll have all of our resources, authors, grade levels, all of that will be up and running by the end of July. I'm almost finished.
Yay. We appreciate you. All right. Thank you again for everybody. We appreciate your time, and we look forward to seeing you at a future webinar. Have a good evening.